Hey, this is 6 Volt in Von Doom's lab. So this video is Hook of the Reaper 1.25 year review. So go over kind of the goals of Hook of the Reaper and kind of what I think about it after this time and kind of updated some of the goals and kind of where I'm headed and where the project's kind of headed. But before we get into that, I'm just getting back in. So a lot of you probably noticed I've been out probably for the last probably about 4 weeks. I've been out, maybe a little more. So what happened is after kind of the fiasco about the code stuff, I kind of took that 2 kind of week break, and then I kind of put the message out I was going to be out until probably like May 30th. But probably about mid-May I went on vacation, actually to celebrate my 50th birthday. So my wife set up a whole amazing vacation for me. So we took off for a whole week and had an amazing time. But since I'm disabled, traveling is very hard on me. So it's taken probably 2 or more weeks to recover. It's been about almost 2.5 weeks, and I'm kind of just getting enough where I feel good enough to kind of get back into things. So I thought it was going to be maybe a week, but yeah, that didn't happen. I got back and I pretty much crashed out for like 4 or 5 days, and then the whole like another 10 days after that, I was just pretty much tired and doing nothing. So that's kind of the reason why I've been out for the last 4 weeks now. And also the vacation was why I kind of wasn't feeling good. So before I left, a lot of people know I wasn't feeling good, and it's probably because of the vacation. So I was trying to lower the meds that I was on. So then when I go on vacation, I can go back onto kind of normal medication, then it works a lot better because a lot of the medication I take is, it kind of only works for so long, then you have to up it. So I kind of go lower or go off and on, kind of rotate things to try to keep it. So I don't have to keep on going up. But now that the vacation's over, now I can make my meds kind of more stable, so I'm not kind of out a lot more. But it gave me a lot of time to think about Hook of the Reaper. Like I said in the last video, I do it for the main reason why I do it is just for fun, as I'm pretty much bored and I want a challenge and I want something to do. That's kind of the main reason. But I thought more about it. I also do it to help the community. So it's nice to do something that helps other people out. And also, I love hearing about how my work makes playing games better for people. Like I told people, like when they got the alien USB light gun and they saw like the 2 digits working for all the games, they're like, "Oh my god!" And it's like this is all set up, and I'm like, "Yeah." And it's like stuff like that is always like amazing to hear. But that's kind of give you overview where I've been and why I'm just getting kind of back into things. Okay, moving on is kind of what's happening with Hook of the Reaper. So I know there's probably some confusion about what's happening. So what happened is that one person kind of took a lot of the code and they didn't give credit. Then the bad thing is then I just don't trust the person. And if I don't trust it, then it becomes a lot more kind of a problem. So that's why I made the GitHub repo private now for the pre-production source code. So the program, Hook of the Reaper programs and releases will go on normally. So that's the only thing that changes with that. It's now will be released on the Hook of the Reaper website. So this is probably what 99% of the people care about, right? They just want to get the new program. They don't really care about the source code. So if you do go to Hook of the Reaper. So if you go to the main page, now you'll see releases here. That will take you to a lot of the releases. And also, if you come over here to download, you can click that, and that'll take you there to the same spot. And these are a lot of the programs I have under I used to have on GitHub. So if you click on Hook of the Reaper releases, that will take you here. Then you come down here to releases, and this will be the latest release. You click on that, then you can download it. So you have the Windows 10 and 11, then you have Windows 8 and older, full release and change files release. So that's kind of now where you get the program for it. So you don't go to GitHub anymore. You go to the Hook of the Reapers website, and that's where you will get the program code. But instead of like totally, you know, like making all the source code, pre-production source code, kind of private and closed, I was like, well, what I could do is I can do kind of like a case by case review. So if people want the source code, they can email me at the gamefiles@6volt.com, and you can tell me like who you are and why you need it, and then I can go through it to make sure that there's no kind of like conflict of interest or trusting things going on truck. So then I can go, and that kind of flushes out kind of a lot of the things because it's not anonymous anymore. So now I know who has the code, and that kind of cuts it down a lot. And also, I don't think a lot of people will probably even want the source code. There was barely, I think only like 5 people have forked the code since the year and the quarter now. So that's not that much. And it's hard to tell how many people have cloned the GitHub, because a lot of people, every time we do another release, a lot of companies will just copy the code anyways to kind of for AI. So right now it's pre-production source code is not totally cut off, but like I said, you can email me, and I'll do from case by case review of if I approve it or not. So when Hook of the Reaper is completed and the bugs are flushed out, I will make the GitHub repo back to public again. So that will make it open source. So like I said, I plan on making it open source from the beginning, and it will be open source when it completes. So I have no plans on changing that, and I definitely want it to be open source, because that's some of the problems what we have with MameHooker, because we don't have the code. But also the sad things, like I had to leave instructions to my wife if something happens to me, as I'm disabled and my health is poor. So she knows, like, hey, so then she knows how to make the GitHub repo, public again. So then people will have the latest code. So kind of a sad thing to think about, but yeah. And also, I did a Facebook post about my response to PolybiousExtreme, the person who took the code and all that fiasco. So I so here is I did do a response to it and put it up on Facebook, but because I was leaving and all that, I didn't put in any video. But also, I'll have a link in the description, so if people want to read it, it kind of sums up all about my feelings about it and closing it out. And hopefully this is the last I'll ever kind of say about it. I just don't like drama. Okay, so hopefully that kind of clears up a lot of things on people, what's happening with Hook of the Reaper. And since I was out for 4 weeks, people probably, didn't know what was going on. But these are the goals I had for Hook of the Reaper. and I kind of updated them a little. So the first one was to implement the new default light gun or the default LG format. This will make any default light gun work with the associated game file, like the INI file. So one change, I took out like the INI file because the INI file is kind of more of a custom file. It won't work with any other light gun, where the default LG will work with any kind of light gun. So I kind of removed that, and actually the default light gun format has been implemented into Hook of the Reaper, and it's been done for a while. So that's why I put a done over here. So that kind of goal is done. The second one is to be open source with the GPL version 3 license. So it will remain open source. But now what would happen, I added pre-production code will be private. People can request the pre-production source code. So this is saying, hey, it will be open source, but the pre-production code will be private and people can request it right now. So I kind of went over that, so I'm not going to do anything more with it. So number 3, I didn't change at all. Have the best performance and be multi-threaded. So actually, now that I've done a lot of more efficiency stuff with it and multi-threading, it's the light gun side and the display side, light controller side are running great. Some people even say it's running too fast sometimes. So, but yeah, it's with the C++ code and with the multi-thread now working good, having 2 threads doing the main work of a lot of the things just for the light gun. Then I have another thread for the light controller. It's working good. So for the fourth one is to be platform independent. Well, reason why I choose a Qt as a compile on many platforms. I did have that as low priority because I was kind of putting Linux kind of at the end of the project. But now, since somebody's helping out with the Linux conversion, I just removed now low priority. So now, hopefully, we can get Linux converted in there. And also, it's kind of one of the reasons why I don't want to do the Windows to Windows communication, because that's only on Windows, where I think the network output is a lot better. That's why I haven't put the Windows to Windows communication in, because I think network, and I've updated a lot of the things to get network in, and Tobias just did the supermodel too, which is awesome. So thank you a lot, Tobias, for that. So now everything has, I think, has network outputs now, which is great. Then the last one was kind of like the bigger one that I changed. I had this as kind of an X because it wasn't really kind of a goal. It's kind of some what I was running into. I had the thing was to do everything that MainBooker can do with serial port devices, starting with light guns, then I/O controllers, and finally force feedback. Able to load INI files now that people's able to load INI files. Now that people have switched to the new default LG game file, this is lowest priority now. I still plan on doing everything that MainHooker does, but with the default LG files and whatever I call the LED light display controller stuff. Right now, Hook of the Reaper can do everything MainHooker can do with respects to light guns and more, which is like 99% true. There is like some small caveats that MainHooker with customization can do that Hook of the Reaper can't do, but it's very small, and then will get fixed when I do advanced features. But just to clear that up, to be totally right with it. So continuing with it, it now uses one game file for everything and no more custom game files. Also, display works more with Hook of the Reaper, as both digits for the alien light gun and light glyph and bars work on open fire. So Now I changed that to do the majority of what MAME Hooker does. I will implement this with the new default LG game files. For the light guns, for display, I will use the new display features in the Hook of the Reaper program. I might put features into the INI side of Hook of the Reaper when the project is wrapping up and it's at its end. Might not do every feature supported by MAME Hooker. And kind of some reason for that is, I don't want to be like held down and say, oh, you have to do everything that MAME Hooker does, because there is some things that like maybe like one or two people use, and then people are like, oh, you have to do everything, and I'm like, well, maybe not. I mean, if it's old and all that, I might not. And also another thing I was looking at with like kind of MAME Hooker and Hook of the Reaper is, what's kind of fun. And a lot of the things that do, like the MAME Hooker INI side of Hook of the Reaper, is really not that fun and boring, kind of, because there's not really too much challenge for it. For example, for the MAME Hooker display functions, like if I put the Ultimark calls into it, all it does, it just does the SDK calls. So the SDK is the software development kit. So that pretty much just gives you all these functions to control, Ultimark's display devices. And pretty much all what MAME Hooker does just sets up those display calls. Like, right, to change a pin intensity, it's just an SDK call with device number, pin number, and intensity. So I think when you do ULI, then you put the device number, pin number, intensity, and that just gets routed right to the SDK. So there's nothing too much with it. It only take a day or two to implement. So that's kind of not really fun. I mean, I'd just be doing there and just hooking it up. And of course, I do a lot more. I do a lot more checking with it than MAME Hooker. And also, if you look at MAME Hooker, it pushes a lot onto the user. And it's reason why MAME Hooker can never really give out game files like Hook of the Reaper can, because they're pretty much, every person almost has to have a custom INI game file for your serial port, or you have to go change the serial port to match it. And a lot of that kind of is pushed. That's how I say it's kind of more pushed onto the user, right? You have a lot of freedom to do everything, but if your light gun needs this, you have to put it into the file. So, which, I was trying to do, not to do with like Hook of the Reaper. And also, it ignores like the quirks and differences of different light guns, like I was saying. And that again puts onto the user where they have to put it into the INI file. So that was kind of why you can't have different INI files a lot of the time, and they're all different from light gun to light gun. You always have to have different INI files. So I'm not saying MAME Hooker is bad. It's more I'm just stating how it works instead of. And also, I just don't want to do what MAME Hooker did. I want to push things forward. So if I did like a carbon copy of MAME Hooker, I'd probably be done by now. I mean, like I said, it's pushes a lot of the stuff onto the users, which then I wouldn't care about, and it would make things a lot easier. But I'd be done. But it wouldn't be any fun to do, and it doesn't push anything forward with it, which kind of goes into kind of the next thing. I'm probably not going to talk all about this, but people can probably pause and read some of it. And it's kind of like I was thinking about the project is Hook of the Reaper and MAME hooker replacement. And I was kind of thinking about this, and I was thinking, well, probably not, no. As Hook of the Reaper is just not a drop in replacement for like MAME hooker. I do have the INI side, which I did, which does the serial port stuff, USB HID, and now has the Ultramark display commands. But it doesn't have everything that the MAME hooker does. But like I said, I'm probably going to stop kind of development for that because it's just boring. And I think I want to push things forward. I just don't want to do what MAME hooker does. And also, like I was saying, even when I did the INI side, I had tons of checks in it when it loads in the INI game file, where MAME hooker does very few checks at all. And I kind of noticed that when MAME Hook of the Reaper runs and then MAME hooker runs and does it work or not? And sometimes MAME hooker will work because it's not doing any checking or anything. But so I kind of was looking at that and saying, okay, so Hook of the Reaper is not a MAME hooker replacement. Kind of, what is it more? So I think since it's pushing forward, since there's a lot more enhancements and upgrades of it. Hook of the Reaper is kind of the next evolution of a hooker program. So it's kind of like going from MS-DOS to Windows. Again, I'm not trying to say MAME hooker is like bad or anything. No, it is. It is a good program, and it just depends on what it was set out to do. And also I had my goals to come in and try to push it forward too. So that's why I think it's more going advancements beyond it, and you can look at kind of what I did with it. And also I looked at all the other kind of hooker programs out there because kind of my more started. There's like Q, MAME hooker, and there's Total Recall. But a lot of those kind of just copied what MAME hooker did. But I know like Total Recall kind of did a little more for their display functions that kind of moved beyond MAME hooker. But I know very little about Total Recall, so I can't really say too much about it, or how much it did go beyond MAME hooker, or is it just like MAME hooker. But I know QMAME hooker is kind of a small copy of MAME hooker. Outlook hookers is a copy of MAME hooker. So no one is trying to push it forward. Like I said, it's just not a replacement. You can't just drop it in. So how does Hook of the Reaper kind of push or for the next evolution of the hooker program, or how push it forward? Well, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, would be the new default LG game files, where any supported light gun in any order can run the default LG game files. And also the user can add their own custom serial port or USB HID light gun to Hook of the Reaper, and then it will run the default LG game files. So this is kind of one of the big major things too. And I remember a while ago I looked at, okay, how many MAME hooker INI game files would you need to equal what Hook of the Reaper has? Well, that's kind of when I went through kind of some of the logic and said, okay, right now I have 12 light guns. Then at the time there was 201 game files, and if you do all the combinations, there will be 667,428 INI game files, which is a crazy amount. But I know that's not kind of real, not everybody's going to have like 4 Reapers, 4 Blamcoms, 4 Open Fires, 4 Alien Light Guns to have all those combinations. But still, even if you get down to like 10 or 20,000 game files, that's still a huge amount when there's only like 200 in one games. And sometimes it's dependent on how many players a game. So here's some of the math that I did. So this is like 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, 4 player. Then I went and found out how many of them existed in all the emulators. Then I have the totals. Then over here you can see 12 light guns. So if it's just 1 player, there's 12 iterations. 2 will be 12 times 12, which is 144. Then this is 12 times 12 times 12, and so on. That's how you get the 667. Then, if we have 15, it goes up to like 1.6 million, kind of. It just keeps on growing and growing exponentially with it. So that's kind of like a good showing how the default LG game file kind of got rid a lot of all these custom files that people needed created. And also it replaced a lot of the commands with generic commands. Like recoil is just, recoil instead of like the serial port command to do it or the USB HID command to do it. But that's really cool. And also, other cool things is like you can change the settings for the light guns without affecting the game file. So you can turn off the reload shaking for a certain light gun, and it will not change the game file at all. Then the Alien, like I said, talking about the Alien light gun has both digits working, and the Open Fire has multiple versions of displays that it can do. And another cool, also kind of, I know a lot of people won't see why. If you only had one light gun and you have everything set up for like MAME hooker, it's kind of hard to see where like default LG game files kind of really will come in. But that will happen in kind of in 2 things. One is when a new light gun is released. Because if you look at the last light gun that released, the RS3 Reaper, people had to wait until people wrote out the custom INI game files for it. So you didn't have force feedback right when it launched. But now that I have Hook of the Reaper up and going, if the light gun maker works with me and I could get the light gun into Hook of the Reaper, so when the light gun launches, it will have, day one, have force feedback with all the game files, with all the default LG game files, which would be kind of crazy because if you look at pretty much all the old light guns, you don't have that. It was always, you had to wait to people to write out the files all the time. There was, 200, I think there's like 230 games. You had to wait until the people wrote out 230 files most of the time for it. And also the other side is if a person buys a different light gun, right, where if they were still using MAME hooker, they would have to modify all the INI game files or create new ones. But with the default LG game files, you don't have to do that since everything uses the same files too. And it doesn't have to worry about the recoil method too, as the RS3 Reaper uses the ammo value more over the recoil signal, where like Blamcom will use the recoil signal over the ammo value. And again, that's all from one file. But like I said, I understand if a person has their light gun set up and has everything working with MAME hooker and no reason to switch over. And also the default LG game files is kind of the main reason why kind of Hook of the Reaper kind of took over for the hooker program segment. And it's because I can have the game files with the program. So when I released the program, I gave all the new game files with it. And then people didn't have to search or anything. They just had it and they're ready to go. They didn't have to go searching for the files. And even like the light gun makers told me they get a lot less game file requests since Hook of the Reaper came out and have all the files for it. So that was kind of one big so that's kind of like the first major thing. And the second thing is, of course, the light controller that I just did. So if you look at kind of like what MameHooker does, you just have pretty much one action. The output signal turns to a different value, then you kind of do that action. It kind of chunks through all the actions, and you can do that one action, and that's kind of it. Well, Hook of the Reaper totally changed all that. Now, Hook of the Reaper opens up multiple actions with timers along with the signal action. So you can still do the signal action with Hook of the Reaper, or you can do other display functions that has multiple actions with timers. So the user now can display flashes, random flashes, sequential, and slashes, where pretty much everything you can program. All the timings are programmable. You can make them bigger, shorter. And instead of writing out all the pins, because some of the MameHooker INI files, if you had display stuff in them, were huge, just because you had to write all the pins over and over and where they go. But now that you have groups, so with a new light controller, you can group all of them together. So you can say, hey, do it with this group, and you only have to do it, have that one group in a different file. So now the whole like having 10 or 20 pins is gone. So yeah, and another thing is with MameHooker is a lot of the times like its flashes was based on the output signals. So if it was based on the recoil, and if you change the recoil timings for the flash, you have to change. It might change light gun's performance, which is not good. So that's why it's kind of totally separated in Hook of the Reaper now because of the timers. But also, also it was a lot of work to do. I mean, since now there's multiple actions happening, Hook of the Reaper has to keep track of all of it, knowing what pins are being used. So if another display function comes in and those groups has pins being used already, it won't use it. So keeping track of everything is a big headache, and people know what I kind of went through that during the development of it. That was the like one action at a time kind of thing until I could do multiple actions at a time. And that was a big advancement. And also, like another big advancement, if you look at like Hook of the Reaper and kind of like MameHooker, Hook of the Reaper for regular lights, it does all the states. It can write up to, depending on what device you're doing, it can write up 8 states at one time, where MameHooker can only do one state at one time. And also, every time you do a write, it takes 8 milliseconds. But now that you can write to multiple uh, bytes of it, or eight pins at one time, it speeds it up by 1/8. So if you do, 24 pins, now that's only 3 writes instead of 24 writes. And that gets rid of the flickering that happens when with the Ultramark devices. And the flickering happens because it takes, to write one pin, it takes 8 milliseconds. So, like I said, if you had like, 10 pins, that's 80 milliseconds. 20 pins is 160 milliseconds. So now that's why you can kind of see them turning off and on, and you get that flickering. So that's going to happen with MAME Hooker if you're using regular lights, but if you do it in Hook of the Reaper, it won't happen because I did the work and made it into writing all 8 states at one time, which was a big advancement in speed up, which will help out the Ultimark devices. The sad thing, I can't do that with the RGB lights because you can only write the intensity per pin. You only can write intensity for one pin at a time, which kind of sucks. So that kind of goes back to the 8 millisecond problem. But also I did 2 different kind of RGB setups. I did the normal RGB groups and RGB fast too, which adds a lot more complexity too. So then, as I talked about it when I was keeping track of all the pins, I used bit shifting and combinational logic, which is harder to do, but it's very, very fast, as bit shifting combinational logic only takes 1 clock cycle per execution. And it's probably the main reason, or one of the main reasons, why assembly code can be so much faster than compile code. So those are just kind of the 2 top major reasons, kind of to kind of show you why Hook of the Reaper is kind of more evolution in the Hooker program. So hopefully I convinced you about why, how much programming it goes for and how I'm trying to move the Hooker program forward. But if these are not just the only things. So if you go to the main website, which is here, and you go down to why use Hook of the Reaper over MAME Hooker, you can see there's a lot more info in there. So like here you can see I use the default LG, then I have the light controller down here, but in between you can see I have a lot more info too about how Hook of the Reaper advanced over MAME Hooker does, what MAME Hooker did. But also that kind of shows you how much more work it takes to do things. So, like I said, instead of doing 1 to 2 days integrating the Ultramark display devices, it took about 2.5, 3 months to get it in, doing all those advancements. So that's why Hook of the Reaper is taking a long time. That's why I'm just probably kind of still starting to device light controllers after a year and a quarter now. Okay, so moving on, I'll talk about the current plan. So what I planned to do right now. So right now I'm doing displays. And I kind of just got done with the lead hook strip project. But with the Hook of the Reaper pre-production code now going private, I want to get Hook of the Reaper done. I don't want it to be in this private mode. I want it to get it done and get the source code released in open source. So I plan to push off integrating lead hook strip into WLED until Hook of the Reaper is completed. So after Hook of the Reaper is completed, I'll do that integration. But because I'm pushing it off, I do have other plans for WLED. So right now, my going through the steps for the display. The first thing I'm going to do is get the RPEG Brooks encoder board into Hook of the Reaper. So this, since it has no SDK library, it's going to be a lot of work to do. But because I had to do a lot of that work, I'll make it work in Windows and Linux too. And since the board uses 1 millisecond USB polling, and you can write multiple LEDs at one time, it will get rid of the flickering seen on other light controllers like the Altamark and probably the LED Wiz, I'm assuming too, since that's an older one and probably has the 8 millisecond write time problem too. So that will take some time, probably 2 to 3 months probably to get that done, but it'll be really cool to have. It'll be like a up to date encoder board, and then you can have some cool, and this will show what the light controller can do without the flickering that happens. Then the second one will be doing key states for both light gun side and the display side. And I just won't be doing just normal key states. Of course, I'll be going beyond. I have ideas of what I'm going to do with key states. So I'll have the normal kind of key state stuff, and I'll have some other new cool other things, other functions for it too. Then three is kind of like a maybe LED Wiz because I don't have a board. So I did try to contact the manufacturer and I never heard back. But so if somebody has one and wants to loan me one, then I can put it in. But until I get a board to test it, I can't get the display stuff into it. So hopefully the manufacturer will talk to me or somebody can borrow me one. But that's kind of like a maybe right now. Then number 4 is to do the WLED project that I talked about beforehand. Number 5 is to do the alien gun 2-digit display. So you can buy these 2-digit displays that are separate from the light gun. I think they're not too much. I think they're like 10 or 15 bucks from China. And I know people like to use them because you can just display information with them. But I was thinking I might just do like a normal USB digit display, right? Then you'll say you give the USB info, like the vendor and product ID, and you say the number of digits. Then you can also give the USB commands to how to write to the digits. So I have that information already for the alien gun 2-digit display, but I'll try to make it more generic so then anybody can use any digit displays that they want to, which would be cool and kind of be more kind of advanced, which is be good. Then number 6 is to display a file to the second display. So this is kind of one of the old things from MAME Hooker where you can display a file to the second display. Then number 7 is kind of like a maybe, where I know one person asked if I could put in keyboard, the addressable LED keyboards. And at first I'm like, well, I'm kind of too busy and all that, but I notice a lot of people do have keyboards with their setup and all that. And I'm like, well, if the keyboard's there, you could easily do the same thing because all it is if you have LEDs, like RGB LEDs throughout it, then you can control that with on the keyboard. So then you can have it, flash red or do some sequential or do whatever you want. So I thought that might be good to have. So I put that as a maybe. And it'd be good if you want me to do that. It'd probably be good to speak up. Go to the Discord. Then I have a section to say, hey, what you want to see in Hook of the Reaper. So if you think that's like, hey, that's a cool idea, definitely say that. So that's kind of my map for displays right now. Then also for what I'm doing right now is, as I talked about, Matt is doing a lot of the work for the Linux conversion, which I want to get into the main code. So the plan for that, for the Linux conversion, is to get Matt's conversion into the main code, so to get it working on Linux. So I think he's gotten it working on Retrobat. I think it was, sorry, it might have not been Retrobat, but the Linux version of the thing. And he's got it working on, I think, MAME, uh, and Dolphin, and some other stuff. I haven't talked to him since I'm just getting back. So that would be really cool to do, to get Linux support in. So that's why I took it from low priority to normal priority, because of a lot of the Matt's work into it. So then the second thing is I do have to rewrite the Ultramark library or SDK so it will work in Linux. So the library will only work in Windows right now. So I will have to rewrite it to get it working in Linux. So then people can have their Ultimark display devices work and under Linux, which would be cool. So that would take some time, and also it'd probably be good because I know that library keeps track of all the pins, and Hook of the Reaper keeps track of all the pins. Well, you don't need both of them keeping track of the pins. So then when I do it, I won't keep track of all the pins, since Hook of the Reaper is already doing that already. Then the last one is update lead hook strip code that is inside Hook of the Reaper to make it work in Linux. So lead hook strip uses the serial port, and it's using the Windows code for the serial port. So I need to convert that to use the regular, I think the Qt version, so that will work in the Linux version too. So that's kind of the plan to get the Linux converting. So this is a lot of work here. This is easily probably thinking like another year easily to probably get all this done, maybe a little more. So that's going to be a lot of work, but hopefully, like I said, we'll have a lot of cool things with it. Okay, so after I get this done, I have future plans. So after the display, I had advanced features for Hook of the Reaper. So so right now the advanced feature list is not complete, so I might like add and remove stuff, but this is kind of what I have right now for advanced features for Hook of the Reaper. So the first one is kind of the bigger one, which I think will be the coolest, is what I'll implement serial port and or USB HID scanning. So when it's not in the game, it would scan like maybe just the USB HID, or maybe I'll do the serial ports too, since Qt has a good serial port scanner, and scan for new light guns. So when a light gun is detected, then Hook of the Reaper will say, hey, there's a light gun, and add it in. So if that's the only light gun, it will make it as player one. Then if you plug in another light gun, it will make it into player two. So then there will be no more player assignments. That will be changing to player priority. So so now you don't need to save your light guns, but it still will be a really good thing to do, because if you have like a lot of light guns plugged in, then it'll know how to prioritize them and know where to put them. Because if you have like six light guns plugged in, and you play the two-player game, then you need player one and player two, and then it will go based on when it was plugged in, or if you saved it and say, hey, that's a saved one, then it can look at the priority. Then it'll know say, hey, take these two light guns as player one and player two then. So that will help out a lot to make it a lot more easier for people to get up and running. So, like I said, it would be best to save light guns in Hook of the Reaper, but it's not make it not needed anymore. You can just plug in a light gun, then Hook of the Reaper will know what light gun it is, and they'll just go from there. So that's the first feature. The second feature is something I already kind of in my head already coded out and how I know I'm going to do it. It's user custom commands. So this is to give full control back to the user and to, like I was talking about with MameHooker, you can do full control where you have it pretty much with a light gun. You have full control, but there is some small use cases where people want to do custom things, which you can't do in Hook of the Reaper yet. But doing these user custom commands now will give people these full controls back, and now you can do those kind of weird cases of what people want to do. So I'll have people up to, so you can add 256 custom commands to it. So it'll have an action for each state of the output signal. So if the output signal is just 0 and 1, then you need like two states usually for it. If it has like 60 outputs, then you can just do 0 and 1. Then 1 will go up to 60. So 0 will do 0, then 1 will do for 1 up to 60. Or you can go have 60 things for it too. And then, depending on the output signal, you'll cut it and do it. So the custom commands will go into the light gun whore file. So for that light gun you're using, you would have to put the custom commands into that. Then you would have to put it into the file too. So I don't know how. I think you can probably use the same number depending on what light gun it is. I still haven't got to there yet, but I think I can get around that to use the same kind of command for then when you put it in the game file, you can use that custom, maybe USR, I think CSTM underscore number, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 255. So then, in the game file, in the default LG, you have the output signal, then you have the player, then you have the command. So then you do the caret, the user custom underscore number. You can put it in there. Then that will do that. Then that will give you back that full control again that you had in MameHooker that you don't have. Yeah, you have like pretty much 99% of there. It's just like these small cases of fully customized control. But that's number 2. So number 3 is load a different light gun whore file for certain games. So in this example, I have a RS3 Reaper, which uses the RS3 Reaper.whore file in the data. But for a certain game, you might want to use a different whore file. So you might want to use RS3 Reaper XYZ.whore. So when that gets that certain game, it will reload up the whore file under that different whore file. So that might be a default LG game option. I still don't know how I might want to do that. Default LG option might be the best way to do it, but I'm still kind of kicking around how to do it. But since it's kind of far out there, I'm not too worried. Number 4 is based on the number of light guns in game, choose different game display files. So now, going back to number 1, kind of, well, even though Hook of the Reaper knows how many light guns you have, and it knows when the game gets loaded up, it will know how many players it has. So then what I was thinking, you have like three, maybe four sections. So you have a section for one player, two player, four player, and maybe three player. So if you only have like one light gun plugged in, it will only use the files from one player files. So then you can have the whole board. So since you know you only have one player, it can use all the lights. So you can do this with different groups. So you can have groups for one player, then different groups for two player, then more different groups for four player, right? Then you can switch those groups out with different commands, display commands. Because if you're just one player, you're only using player one's outputs, right? First player outputs. Then two player will be the first and two outputs kind of thing. So then, like I said, so if it's only one player, you can use the whole board. If it's two player, then you can split the board in half. And if it's four player, it'll be cut into quarters kind of things. So depends, because I know a lot of people when they play, it's only one player. So then that will give you all the lights in your cab instead of just half or a quarter of it, which would be kind of cool. So like I said, since it knows and I have different things, if the game is four players and you have two light guns, then it uses the two player files. If the game is four players and you have four light guns, then it uses the four player light files. If the game is two players and you have four light guns, it will use the two player files because it's a two player game. So I thought that would be cool to do. I think maybe David Grace or maybe somebody else you suggested that. I know this is a suggestion from somebody. So number 5, which is kind of cool, which I was thinking, since kind of going off the same thing, since Hook of the Reaper knows the light guns, it can set up the emulators. So for example, Hook of the Reaper knows you have two Blamcom light guns. So then it sets up a Techno Parrot for the Blamcom light guns, right? Then you unplug the Blamcoms and you plug in two open fire light guns. Then Hooker Reaper sees the change, then it goes back and sets up Techno Parrot and switches out the Blamcoms with open fires now. And I thought that'd be kind of cool because then you can plug in, if you have multiple light guns, you can plug it in. Then I think Techno Parrot uses XML file to know how to set things up. So then Hook of the Reaper can just modify that XML file to set everything up. So it knows what light guns you have, and then it can just modify the file for everything. So that was kind of a idea I had. If people have multiple light guns, and then you have to set things up. But I think if you just say, hey, I just want to change the light gun, and then you can just plug it in. It'll be like pretty much plug and play. Like I said, you just plug in two Blamcom light guns, it'll set it up. Then you unplug it, and you plug in two open fires, and it'll set it up, and not too much. So I know kind of game drives do this already, but this will just be like a normal kind of thing that Hook of the Reaper does. And then I can also do it for MAME, Supermodel, and maybe Nixos emulators. It might get a little harder with Nixos emulators, especially with Dolphin, because sometimes you need a different, depending on what game you're playing, it might need to be different controls. But that's another idea that I had. Then the sixth one is kind of have, instead of using like switches when you load up Hook of the Reaper, you can have access to Hook of the Reaper by using a command program. So this might be used mostly for drive builders or other people that want to do things. So for example, you want to use a certain default LG game file for the next game. So even though this game has nothing to do with this default LG game file, it will load up that one. So you can tell Hook the Reaper to load up this default LG game file for the next game, kind of thing. Also, you could do other things like change the player assignments or priority without opening the player assignment or priority window. So it's kind of giving you kind of back access into Hook of the Reaper to do other things. And, instead of having switches, you can just use this program to tell Hook of the Reaper to do things. I just have those kind of examples, but there's some other things for it too. Then the last one will be starting up an application in the default LG game file, kind of like my program ROM sniffer. So it'll probably be like, it most likely will be a default LG option, maybe something else where, when the game starts and all that, you can have another program start and have options in it too, depending on, well, I don't, since you're using the default LG game file, the ROM file, so you don't really need the ROM name like ROM sniffer, but it might be just good to have that application to start an application when different games are starting. So that was the last one. Like I said, these are not set in stone or anything. Then after that, it will be just kind of a wrap up, and this is where kind of I'll decide if put any features that I missed in. So anything I missed, I do, then decide if I want to continue the main hooker INI side and Hook of the Reaper, which right now I'm kind of leaning towards no, I think. Like I went through the whole thing, I think Hook of the Reaper is more evolution of the hooker program. And I think I just want to leave kind of main hooker to main hooker kind of thing. And that's kind of consider, not I can say not a bad way, just the old way kind of thing. Then also I'll have to update the tutorials and videos on the site. Also update the technical support section and add more Hook of the Reaper documentation to the website too. But that's kind of like wrapping everything up. Then this will probably take like 6 months to a year. So right now, probably Hook of the Reaper is probably a year and a half to 2 years, maybe 1 to 2 years, probably around there until it gets finished. So then, if it takes 2 years, then it'll be 3.25 years to get done. So it'll be a long program, but be good. It'll be a lot of features. Or if it's 2 years, then it'll be, well, if it's a year, it'll be 2 years and a quarter to, and if it's a year and a half, it'll be 2.75 years, almost 3 years. But that's kind of like my year review of Hook of the Reaper and kind of what I'm thinking about it. So if you have any comments, please let me know. You can leave them in the comments on YouTube or leave them in Discord. But I'm slowly getting back into it, and it's good to be back. So thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.